I always had this, impression of Narada with this really alpha lioness type of energy, just seeing him interact with all the different ladies, a lot of different personalities in the hostel.
You get bored when you have nothing to do. And I was like, nah, to be honest with you, I feel like I'm just breaking layers constantly in my mind and in my heart by having these key practices. Well, if you follow the signs, you get more magic in your life. If you don't, the magic leaves. When you're compassionately witnessing something, you have an opportunity to look back and go, is that who I actually want to be? When you're condemned for it, it feels like this taboo thing that you need to hide, or a part of you that's not right and you need to separate from. But we're all a multitude of faces. That idea of who you want to be is probably a pretty authentic version of who you want to be.
You're listening to Conscious Conversations, a personal and spiritual growth podcast to help you become your fullest expression. Enjoy.
Hey everybody. Hi, I'm Marco Jack, your host and the founder of Divicati. Welcome to the 14th episode of Conscious Conversations, a podcast for growth-oriented and mission-driven divine beings. This is a space where we host high vibrational conscious conversation with the intent to help you become the fullest expression of yourself. Each episode, we will dive deep into rabbit holes and always end with at least one big action step that you can apply to help optimize your life, mind, body, soul, and leave the podcast feeling awakened, inspired, and empowered. Our broader mission at Divicati is to co-create a 5D world by harnessing the power of collective ascension and collaboration. I'm super glad that you can join us today. Today we have a special guest, Narada Guzman. He is a youth mentor, group facilitator, and he's a natural leader with the chief archetype, which we'll dive deeper in a little bit. And he's also a space setter, a music artist, someone that wears a lot of different hats. He is also someone that is really aware of what's going on around the world as well, a thought leader in that space. Narada and I met in the summer of 2018 when I was just finishing my, second year of university, and I was a bit lost and not really understanding who I am in this journey. And I went to a kind of solo trip in Barcelona and in Madrid. That's where we met at a hostel. And I remember Narada and his friend Alex just had such an impact in my life during that, 2 weeks time. They really taught me how to express myself and be myself. And I always had this, impression of Narada with this really alpha lioness type of energy, just seeing him interact with all the different ladies, a lot of different personalities in the hostel. That just kind of like helped me understand how to be myself a little bit more. So it has been almost 3 years since that we've met, and we've been going a little back and forth here and there. And so today I'm just super honored to have him on the space together to talk about a topic that I really feel that he has impacted me in my life and helped me become a true version of myself. So thank you. And it's an honor to spend some conscious time with you to dive deep into this rabbit hole today, man.
Thanks, Marco, man. I feel like you talked me up more than probably what I'm worth. But yeah, I really appreciate the introduction. And really honored to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Nah, man, that is coming from a genuine space of how you have helped me. Perhaps, sometimes you just shining your light without even knowing, right? And I guess like I was just able to see you as like a bigger brother, someone that I can look up to and be like, hey, and I still remember we had those conversations where you say, hey, you'll get there. I'm not sure if you recall those ones, but yeah.
Definitely.
All right. Could you tell the audience a little bit more about like what you do with your youth work? Because I feel like that's not something a lot of people do. And I think it's a very inspiring format, especially, as someone that we've spoken before, you really care about the next generation and kind of nurturing the youth.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess the journey started off when I was about 20 years old. And I'll probably go back to a dream I had. So I had a dream that my mum had passed away, and I woke up from that dream from a phone call from a hospital in Brisbane. I was living in Melbourne at the time, so they're about 2,000 kilometers away from each other. And it said it was from the Brisbane hospital saying that are you Desmond McKenzie's next of kin? And at the time, I was going out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. I didn't even know what a next of kin was. So I was just like, what is a next of kin? And they said the person that makes the decision on life and death relating to this woman, which was my mum. And I said, I guess I am. I flew up there, and I have a little brother who's 14 years old, or who was 14 years old at the time. And unfortunately, a week after that, my mum passed away. So I spoke to my little brother, and I told him we have different dads. And I said, look, you can come and live with me, but your life's going to be much different to what it was. And like I said, at that time, I was just going out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, and didn't really have much direction in my life. And I kind of made a promise from there that I was going to give my little brother something to look up to. We grew up in like really unfortunate circumstances, like a lot of poverty and not really having a place to stay, and a lot of drug use and unsavory characters around us, a lot of alcohol and those kind of situations. So we didn't really have too much to look up to. So I made the decision then and there that I was going to go and do something that would give him something to look up to. And I was like scouring about like what I should do, and I felt like throughout my life, I'd always been pretty good with people, and naturally people had kind of gravitated towards me to talk about issues or to talk about anything that was kind of going on for them. And I was always able to hold the space in that frame. So I thought, why don't I do something in youth work? So I went and studied a diploma, did a 2-year youth work diploma. And then when I got out of that, I had all these ideas of like doing like program management or running programs for young people. So getting them into activities to do things. When I finished, so in the second year of school, I had this amazing placement, which was at an organization called Operation New Start, which took kids that were at risk of falling out of school and dropping out for good. They took them on an 8-week program. So it was like for the whole school term. And you would take them to do these incredible activities. So we'd go do like outdoor adventure activities in the afternoon or in the morning. And then the other side of that is that you do like something educational. So you might do sex education or drug education in the morning. So it was this really kind of good balance of stuff for the mind and then stuff for the soul and stuff for the body. And it was kind of at that point where I realized that like, this is an industry that I want to be a part of. And the program area was definitely something that like I would love to be a part of, to create experiences and new experiences for young people to challenge themselves in really safe environments, which I think is the key there. So I finished my schooling, and once I finished schooling, that job wasn't available to me. They downsized a bit, and I was given an opportunity to work in residential units, which is like, I would say it's like the end of the line for young people that are out of home care, which is when they like get removed from their family here in Victoria. It's through the Department of Health and Human Services, Child Protection. So young people would get removed from their family. If there's got no like kinship family around, they might look for foster care. If they can't be in foster care, they'll go to resi care. So kind of like really started at the bottom, at the in the trenches, I guess. Right. I'd say, in this industry. And from there, I worked there for like 4 years. And I remember going through this phase where initially I thought, this is amazing. I don't have any boss that's looking over me. I'm here just looking after the young people. And it was pretty hectic. Like there's a lot of drug use and a lot of like violence and a lot of like, whatever, prostitution and exploitation from the young girls in particular, sometimes young boys as well. So it was quite like a grimy scenario, and it was very much like the underbelly or the underworld of what society sees or what society doesn't see. It was like the underworld of what society doesn't see. So that was like an incredibly interesting experience to have that. And I went through this phase where I thought initially this is great, and then I realized how much red tape is around the child protection or government way of looking after things. They do things based on risk as opposed to based on relationship. which I think is a big kind of difference in how you approach a situation when you're approaching from a place of risk over a relationship. So after about a year of working there, I thought to myself, it doesn't really matter what happens long term here, just as long as when I'm on shift and I'm here, the young people are given safe spaces and that they're given a place to kind of enjoy themselves and smile and laugh. So I kind of made that my mission for the next couple of years. Then I went traveling. For a year, took a year off. I bought a bus, went around Australia, was going on my own, I guess, rite of passage to kind of understand myself a bit better, having kind of came straight out of TAFE here, which is kind of like a community college type of thing, straight into the workforce. So had some time off, started uncovering different parts of myself. Around that time, I was doing a lot of yoga and a lot of meditation. And it was interesting. I remember being like traveling and not doing much throughout the day. And my girlfriend at the time was chatting on the phone. She was like, do you feel like you get bored when you have nothing to do? And I was like, nah, to be honest with you, I feel like I'm just breaking layers constantly in my mind and in my heart by having these key practices. So I went traveling, saw a bit of the world, went to South America, went to Europe, and then came back and with $4 in my account. I had maybe 20 grand when I left and came back with $4 in my account and started again.
That's when after I met you, you started with.
No, this is before that. So the first time I went traveling over to Europe. And then came back, had $4 in my account and started again. I went back and worked in the residential units, back on the floor. And after about 3 months, I was doing some really, really good work and was really kind of creating amazing spaces with these young people. And I thought that I want to have a bigger impact. So I applied for a job as a case manager, which is individually managing young people's cases and their journey. So you do case plans, organize meetings with their care team, student support groups. There's a lot of documentation, all those kind of things. And I was fortunate because one of the young people that I was looking after was with a wonderful organization called the Lighthouse Foundation. And that's like a charity that works with homeless young people. And I'll explain a bit more. So I used to go to this place, and every time I walked into this office, Lighthouse, I just had this sense of belonging and this sense of this is somewhere that I would love to work one day. So I remember being down at a courthouse at Dandenong, which is a pretty notorious area here in Melbourne. And I was at the court with my young person who was going through had a charge against him for stealing a car or something like that. And the director of care from the Lighthouse Foundation came down, and she was there to support the young person as well, and spoke to me and said, hey, look, we're looking to expand a bit more, and we would love to offer you a job if you want to come work at our organization. And I was like, look, to be honest with you, I'm ready to quit this industry altogether and do something different. So I'd be an idiot not to take this opportunity. So that was about in 2016. So I took that opportunity, went and worked there, and noticed the difference when you work, like I said before, within relationship and within community, as opposed to just purely from a risk-based factor. And through there, I was able to kind of, learn so many new ideas about myself. I was so blessed that I had managers and people that cared enough about me to tell me the truth at times. Sometimes I can be quite righteous. Sometimes I can be quite straightforward, or say things that are punches in the face as opposed to offerings. And I was really able to kind of get checked a number of times throughout that journey in a really safe way. So it wasn't just you're this and that, and then see you later. It was you're this and that, and I'm here to help you understand why you are. So in the first time in my life, I probably had people that I really kind of looked up to for me personally in my life as well. So I stayed there for a couple of years. Then I went traveling. That's when I met you. And I think going through that passage, you mentioned in the introduction to me that you saw me as this alpha, and I was probably doing pretty well with women when we were overseas as well. And that was just me exploring myself more, because I think in terms of being an alpha, maybe that comes from like being a leader, but not knowing quite how to harness your powers. So you play it off in these defensive and ways where you become like the center of attention or like the leader of the pack, but by force as opposed to by choice from the community. And I think that I was probably transitioning out of that stage maybe when I met you, and it was still playing out a little bit. I also think that like, yeah, probably for the first time in my life, I opened up to the idea of like I'd always been quite particular with who I got with, or who, like, women, if they were interested in me, I would always be a bit more quieter, or like I'd be a bit like, if a woman was interested in me. And for the first time in my life, I think I flowed naturally with what was happening. And for the first time in my life, I felt kind of like, in Australia, women don't look at me how they were in Europe. So I set that as actually one of my intentions when I went over there, to really like explore that area. If opportunities came my way, I wasn't going to deny it. I wasn't going to deny the experience. And blessed, I met some really amazing people overseas, you included, but inclusive of some women as well that I still kind of speak to. We still chat, we still catch up, and it's this really kind of like authentic way of just two humans connecting. And I think that's like the beauty of when you open up to spaces like that. So, and I probably felt like the highest I've ever felt in terms of expression overseas. Do you know what I mean? When there was nothing really holding me back. There wasn't these perceived ideas of who I was from friendship groups and stuff like that. I was free. And free to explore myself, even if it meant being an alpha sometimes, or doing things that were like a bit combative, or a bit like, people would look at me and be like, what the hell? So, I felt kind of really, really free from there. Then, since coming back, it's been another journey of like, I don't know if you've read The Alchemist, but when you don't follow the signs, the magic leaves. Well, if you follow the signs, you get more magic in your life. If you don't, the magic leaves. And I definitely had an experience of the magic leaving, and it's been a really kind of interesting journey of trying to regain back that magic, regain back that authentic expression of self. And then throughout that, I'd been offered an opportunity to work at an organization called the Man Cave, which runs men's groups for boys at school. So it's like based on a rites of passage framework. And a rites of passage is like, it's, I guess, relevant to the context of a community. So I guess if we're in an African tribe where the main threat is lions, a rites of passage is where you take either a woman or a man through a journey of going to, rites of passage is many different things, but I guess if we're talking about context of become, hero's journey, exactly. So if we're talking about the context of, a boy turning or coming into a man, he might be removed from the community by the elders, told stories, given an element of challenge. So it might be, okay, the challenge is that you need to go out because our main threat is lions. You need to go out and kill a lion on your own so that we know as a man in the community, you can protect us. Then you come back. So how that relates to like today's concept is that like, we don't have to kill lions, but we still have this desire as men and as people to prove and earn our place in the community. And without like safe outlets to do that, we end up doing stupid shit. So, it's whoever can drink the most, or whoever can drive the fastest car, or whoever can sleep with the most women. You know what I mean? And that becomes like the rite of passage, or that becomes the hero's journey from boyhood to manhood. So it's been, over the last couple of years, I've worked both at the Lighthouse Foundation and at the Man Cave. And it's been a really interesting journey to match those two organizations up. And we do something at the Man Cave called a check-in, and that Lighthouse Foundation is called I feel like saying. So it's really just like a settling into the space and then making the other person aware of where you're at. I'll explain a bit more about that later on. But just kind of like, it's interesting to just match the experiences you learn in one community and, matched up to another community's values and morals. So then this year, I've finished up at the Lighthouse Foundation, where I was doing a program manager's role. I'd worked through many, many different roles there, did a program manager's role there and finished up in February 19th. And since then, I've like fully committed to the man cave. And it's another like humbling journey where you go from like being a real leader and a real like go-to person in the community to then starting kind of afresh again, having to prove like all your values, internal values, and having to improve your integrity, having to prove that you are worth a place in the community. And then once again, stepping into leadership roles where you can offer other people the chance to do the same.
Right.
So it's been a bit of a humbling journey, but it's also, very, very rewarding in that sense as well. So that's been my journey.
Right. And I just want to kind of reflect back that how it all started with a pain, perhaps, or also a necessity that you have to step up as that, mentor for your younger brother, back when you're 20 years old. So like sometimes when we kind of circle back, then we can connect the dots, right? Like what Steve Jobs said. It was like maybe at that time you felt lost, like, oh, I'm just assuming, like, why is this happening? But right now you're like, okay, this happens for me, not to me. So I feel like a lot of the times when I talk to people that are a little bit more maybe mature or was able to blossom into their truest self at a younger age, myself included, it's always because of certain pains that happen or certain traumas. And in that pain, it can really go both ways. It can shut us down, or it can turn us into something that's harder, something that is like more true. And in that pressure, sometimes we thrive or we don't. So perhaps obviously you kind of did, and you step into that role where you needed to be for your brother at that stage. So yeah. But I just want to ask as well, how does the work in terms of like helping these the youth and all that what you do, how does that tie into authenticity? Because that when I asked in our prior conversation, you said that is kind of like the main thing that you help them kind of tap into and help them unlock. So I'm just wondering, how does authenticity come into your work, and how does that play a role?
Sure. Probably just pick up what you said before about like, that's a great mind state switch when you go from these things are happening for me and not to me.
Mm-hmm.
It turns it into a hero's journey as opposed to a victim's journey.
Mm.
And also, around motivation through pain, I think that's another journey that we go through. Like, I wrote in one of my rap songs, all my motivation comes from pain. And it's like, I don't know if I want to motivate from there for the rest of my life. I actually want to tune into a place where I can motivate from love. And right. I think I've got a tattoo that says, in hindsight, it's all love. So naturally, when you go back on it, you go, okay, yeah, that's why that happened. But I'd love to be able to, in the moment, really understand it and then come from a place of love and not from a place of like pain or grit or to trying to prove someone else wrong. How does authenticity tie into the work I do? Wonderful question. I think that how it ties in is the fact that I personally believe that everyone's journey here is to help others. It's the greatest gift that you can give. It's better than receiving, because when you help, you actually help yourself. And I think that that's like, the more that you help yourself, the more that you strip back the layers, the more that you tap into authenticity within yourself. I also think that it's about like, for me in my journey, creating spaces where people feel safe enough to be authentic. And I think that like when you've experienced what I've experienced in this industry around, the underbelly of things, but you've also experienced the height of how things can be in wonderful communities and organizations, you create range. So you have a tolerance or a range, which is very, very wide, so that people can just express what they need to express, and you can receive it. And when people express things that gets witnessed and received in a compassionate way, it allows them space and time to go, is this who I actually want to be? Does that make sense?
Right.
Does that make sense for
you?
Yeah,
like you create like an environment where people don't feel like they're constantly being judged for just expressing and exploring who they are without even knowing if that's really them.
Yep.
That's right.
And sometimes, you see throughout life that people will express things and straight away get condemned for it, as opposed to compassionately witnessed in it. When you're compassionately witnessing something, you have an opportunity to look back and go, is that who I actually want to be? When you're condemned for it, it feels like this taboo thing that you need to hide, or a part of you that's not right and you need to separate from.
Right.
But we're all a multitude of faces. Do you know what I mean? I always say that, like, I can be a piece of shit. I can be an absolute servant king. Do you know what I mean? And I'm anywhere along that line. It just determines like where I'm at the time, where I'm going through emotionally, and what's being offered to me of where on that line I sit, where on that spectrum I sit. But the more times I've been witnessing the piece of shit and then going, actually, is that who I want to be? The more times I can realize, no, I want to be the servant king.
Right.
That makes sense?
That makes sense, yeah. Because I'm a Gemini, man. Because I got multiple faces, multiple voices, multiple personality, and that's why in this conversation today, I myself want to kind of dive deep into understanding like who am I really, and so like what does it mean to even be authentic? Just maybe starting from there.
For me, what it means to be authentic is to being your truest expression of self at any moment. Like I said, wherever you are along that spectrum, you can be authentic in that. That's probably the easiest way I can describe it. There's many, many more ways that you can describe it, but I think authenticity is bringing. I also think that if you talk about life purpose here, once you tap into your life purpose, or once you tap into an understanding of who you want to be, you have something to strive towards. And I guess if you have an idea of who you want to be, that idea of who you want to be is probably a pretty authentic version of who you want to be. So there's little keys that you need to do to get to that version of yourself. So I would say for me, what is authenticity? Authenticity is the truest expression of self in whatever realm that is. Do you know what I mean? You'd like to strive to be the highest version of who you can be on this planet, but also don't disregard it when you're not. Don't disregard it when you're going through stuff and it's coming out in ways that you didn't expect, or you're projecting. That's still authentic as well.
Okay, yeah, I thank you for saying that, because as in the introduction we said that this podcast is to help people become one of their truest full expression as well, right? And I do resonate with what you're saying there, where when we have like a long-term goal and we kind of like understand the ultimate version of who we want to be, and you said that our mission, and that kind of anchors us to a certain kind of identity. And I understand that's a very important element to help us become a little bit more authentic, and express ourselves in ways, like picking your job, or like where you want to live, etc., who you want to hang out with. But how about in the moment to moment, like right now, how can I even be more authentic in my podcast, in my YouTube videos, like right now? I'm sure I'm not being 100% me. So how can we tune it so that
I think what you say is probably correct. So like how I do that, or how the advice I'd give to you, which is advice to me, is to set intentions. Do you mean, what do you want this podcast to be? Okay, cool. You always have something to go back to. How do I want to be in this podcast? Do I want to be open? Do I want to be critical? Cool. You've got these reference points of what you can go back to. I also think that there's like, it's not always as easy to be authentic. You're doing a podcast, you have to present a bit.
Right.
You have to ask questions. You might want to delve into a story about yourself, but you have to ask questions and present a bit as well. So I think that like maybe another way I can describe it is that, like, if you think about your ego as the projector out into the world, and your essence is your true version of self, I think the key is to try to align those as much as possible. So what I would offer to you is like, how can you be the most authentic version of yourself? Just make sure that your essence is as close as it can be to the ego when you're doing this, because you have to have a bit of ego to project out when you're dealing with the world. It's just the way that I personally believe that it is. Yeah. So
can you tell me more a little bit about the essence? Because I haven't heard that term used in this context before.
So I would say, like, for me, essence is about what people feel when they're around you. Yeah. So let me ask you a question.
Sure.
When you die, what will people say about you?
Like what I hope or what I think?
Both.
Either. I wish, to be like a leader. Like someone said that, oh, Marco was someone that like took initiative, like was proactive. This is one of the reasons why I make these videos as well. It's kind of like my legacy piece, like where people can like revert back to. Someone that, for me, it's like someone that trying to make a good impact, trying to make the world a better place. After he died, before he died.
That's what you hope people say?
I think that would be what some people would say. But I also have the fear of like perhaps people saying that I care too much about my work, but not like being the present of like loving like the person when they are in front of me. Like I'm doing a better job in that perspective where I'm like, I show more appreciation. Like hey, like, hey, come over here, man. Like, I want to just tell you how much I appreciate this like present moment right now. Like, that's not who that's not who I am before, but that's who I am becoming more and more. So I hope like people would all say it, like I'm also a loving dude that is allows people to, like, I can help them tap into their potential. And that's what someone told me last weekend. He's like, hey man, you know what, like you're someone that helps the group kind of be their truest potential. So I was like, wow, I really appreciated that. So yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah.
I would say if you can help someone tap into their true potential, that's the essence of being a leader. Yeah, they might be like, oh, he was strong or he was this, but the actual essence of it is like help me tap into my true potential.
Right.
And it's interesting that like we always sell ourselves a bit short. You said that I'm not present. I'm not as present as I want to be. The essence is that I can feel that you are present with me. Do you know what I mean? So you're just selling yourself short. So like how I would probably describe you is that Marco was really caring, present, and curious.
Right. I'm definitely curious dude. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. So that's like, I think like the essence is what people feel right there around you. So like one of my mates' dads died, and he was a bit of a prick. Not like, to just say it bluntly, he was a bit of a prick, and he did lots of shitty things, but he was pretty funny as well. So when he dies, no one remembers the shitty things. They remember your essence, and the essence was you're a funny dude. You know what I mean? So just things like that where I think that if you can remain in your essence, funniness or whatever, that's what you want to bring. You want to bring your light through funniness, all the aggression and all the, being a cunt or sorry for the language, being like an aggressive person or someone who's rude and stuff, that's further away from your essence. That's your ego projecting over this side.
Right.
So the idea is to like, you get rid of those elements of yourselves and continue to project the essence of who you are.
So what I'm
getting, if your essence present, curious and caring,
right,
the other stuff can fall by the wayside. You just remain in that essence and let people feel that around you, and the rest will flow.
Right. It is. I'm also getting the sense it's not about how you want other people to feel around you. It's more like, how do you want to feel around yourself? What kind of emotions that you want to feel at each present moment, and like feel into that, and then allow that to express that, right, a little bit.
I think that there's always two journeys. There's the inner journey and the outer journey. You know what I mean? So that like, because we live in a society which is based around the beauty of this 3D world is that we can share here. That's what we're here for. We're here to share experiences. We're here to share our lives. We're here to share love, share emotions. So there's always that outside journey, and the inside journey is one of breaking through your own layers around that. Not so much how do they perceive me, of like how do I perceive myself? You know, what is the essence that I want to bring? That's like the inside journey. The outside journey is what people just feel of you naturally.
Yeah, I want to ask, like, if there's when we talked about the spectrum, right? Or some people refer to the lower versus the higher self, or the different voices in their head, the different, desires and wants, impulses, thoughts, ideas, right? There's just so many things going on. And then if you are aware, you're the conscious observer behind that. And then you can, like, if you're more, unconscious, you kind of like, oh, you have a thought and you impulsively just kind of like dive into that, right? But as you are like someone that works on yourself a little bit more, you become more aware. Like, I'm at a stage in my life where it's hard for me to discern, and decide like which voice or thought or idea is the most authentic and aligned for me. And so in that essence, like, in that context, how do you choose like who to be? How do you know which one is authentic versus which one is not,
I can't tell you all the answers. That's I would say that's your journey to go on.
Right.
That's your journey to explore and go on. And for me, sometimes I get a bit paralyzed in that. Hey, I get a bit like, oh shit, there's so many things I want to do, or so many expressions of self that I just end up not expressing. But I think as I go through the journey, it's about articulating that. Like I said, about sharing. Do you know what I mean? This is why having really close and intimate and supportive relationships is so important, because the idea is articulating that. I've got a million thoughts going on at the moment, and I feel like this could be an avenue, and that could be an avenue, and that could be. The minute you start to share it, the minute it gets kind of a bit clearer and a bit easier.
Sorry, I just want to chime in to let the juice flow a little bit as well.
Yeah, man, 100%.
Because that is what essentially like part of coaching is about. Like, what we believe, in terms of coaching, is that when you create the space and ask questions, like, your inner coach can come out, right? The coach is not there to give you the answer, but rather to draw out and elicit the answers inside you. And so I can relate, when the coach asks me a certain question, I get a little bit more clarity, but as well as when I kind of coach myself, when I kind of walk around and reflect, like I like to do in the mountains. And I kind of have this app where I kind of talk into, and it translate into a text, and then where I can kind of, go back into. And then so I just have this like 30-minute, 40-minute conversation with myself, and it just gets clearer. Like, you're just kind of giving advice to yourself. In that moment, I was like going from like someone that's like super confused, super down, to like almost like a hype man in like the span of like 10 to 20, like, the span of 30 or 40 minutes. So yeah.
And that's just talking to yourself. You know what I mean? The issue is sometimes, well, the issue that I've found in my life is that sometimes when I'm trying to change from you language to I language. So like sometimes when you speak, I'm going to say sometimes when I speak to people, they want to chime in with their 2 cents. They don't just want to create the space. They don't want to be a compassionate witness to what I'm going through. They want to go, what you should do is that, and what you should do is this. I'm sure that you've received that in your life. I know that I have in my life. So that's a really, really good tool to, I guess if we talk about tools to self-love, or tools to get back to that higher expression of self, or most authentic version of self, everyone will find their own way. For some people, it's riding a bike. For some people, it's walking in the bush. For some people, it's meditating. Some people, it's, having creative outlets, exercise. So like a whole bunch of those kind of tools will clear the mind a bit and allow you to operate from your heart center. And generally, when you operate from your heart center, I would also say that, like, we'll talk about this a bit later on, but aligning the 3 brains, being aligned with your expression, and
that's
not just out of one mode.
Yeah.
Sorry?
That's a bonus content. If you want to check out the bonus content, so make sure you join the group after, and then Narada would guide us on a guided experience a tool to align that 3-brain Amit technique.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to say one thing before we kind of keep it going, because when you talk about self-love, and I actually did a episode, the previous episode on self-love, and after that episode, and I was reflecting on it, when I can distill it down, and as I was prepping for this episode as well, like you said, there's so many different tools, but for me at least, what it boils down to is internal caring awareness, or internal caring attention. For me, that's self-love. When I put that awareness within me and I care for myself and I check in head to toe, all the emotions, like my skin, like how I look, like I'm manicuring myself, in a sense. So that's for me. For me, that's what I got, and that's why I boiled down to. I just want to reflect that. But
I love that. I just also, in that, it's one thing being aware, the other one's putting it into action.
Right.
Be aware that, I should have had this internal caring awareness, the other things to go. Cool. So when that comes up, I'm not going to let myself down in it.
Right.
I'm going to make sure I do the thing I need to. So whether it's any of the things I listed before, or, you have your own way of doing it. Yeah. So anyway, back to you. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no. So you were saying, like, when we are in our heart space a little bit more often, when we have that internal, like, awareness, intention, and action, then you're saying that we can become a more, fuller expression of ourselves, because we are
Definitely.
we are tuned into our heart.
Mm-hmm. I think, look, there's so many multi-layers to it. Yeah. And I think, a lot of the idea is that, you might have great expression through heart space, but you're not received in that expression. Do you know what I mean? So there's multiple kind of layers you kind of go through to create a safe place for expression in whatever it is. Hopefully that comes from your heart space when it's aligned with your mind and your gut. But there's there's so many things that can get in the way of that. Even society's ideas of what's wrong and right. Your own ideas of what's wrong and right. Rejection, you might express yourself and get rejected in it. That closes spaces off. Uncertainty of purpose and role in world, or in communities, or in your family, in your friendship groups. Disconnections within your mind, within your heart, within your gut. Disconnections even in perceptions. You know what I mean? You might think you're doing something. I don't know. I always ask, not always, but I ask this question sometimes around, have you ever felt like you were doing something amazingly well, and then someone's come in and just told you off for it? Have you ever had that experience in your life?
Right now at the spot, I can't think of something, but I would remember, when I was just having fun and playing and throwing paper airplanes in my classroom, and then this teacher came in and just got super pissed off, and I had to write I would never throw paper airplanes ever 50 times as a punishment, and I was just being a kid, right? That's
so that exactly, and that connects back to your idea of having fun. That connects to back to your idea of spontaneity, back to your idea of, even making paper planes. How often do you make paper planes anymore? Little things like that. Do you know what I mean? Or maybe you do it out of rebellion. I didn't get to do it one time, so now I get to do it. I'll tell you a story that happened to me. Probably the most recent one was that I was putting away dishes in the home, and I put away the dishes because I noticed that no one was doing them, and put the knives in the drawer. And then one of my other roommates came back and said, "Oh, who put all the dishes away?" In my heart, I'm like, "Yeah, I did them." Yeah. Thinking that they'll be like, "Oh, thanks for that." They've been sitting here for a while. And he's like, "We've got a knife block. Don't put the knives in the drawer." Do you know what I mean? So it's just just little things like that. It makes you want to go, well, fuck, I'm not going to do any dishes. I'm not going to put them away again. Do you know what I mean? Or next time I do them, I'll make sure I put them there and I'll show you what. Difference in perception is a really big thing as well, where you think you have an idea of what you're doing, or an expression of what's happening, and someone else just goes, "That's not how I took it." And so it's got to be these matching up of authentic people that are connecting in those spaces as well.
Yeah,
people that are expressing authentically, and other people that are as well, that can then create space for others to do the same thing.
but what, like, I understand that, and that's where, beautiful friendship and environment comes in, right? When you get to interact and be with people in a systematic way that gets you and understands you. But how about, there would be, business environments or network environments and people that you just don't know, but you still want to like shine that light, and maybe it won't be received well. Sometimes even within the friend group that you are in, right? And so how do you deal with when there are those, I guess, you know, circumstance where you're not fully received 100%, 100% authentically? How do you deal with that?
Um, so like, I think that if you don't fulfill your potential here, that's when you start to receive really, like here on earth, that's when you start to receive really negative karma in a sense. So if you're going to a job that you maybe don't hate, but so people can get addicted to the face that they put on as well. Yeah, so people can get actually addicted to going, you know what, I can put this put this away from myself, and then I can be this
Right.
person there. It gives me role and purpose here. So
Right.
maybe that is that's a different expression of themselves, where they shut off other parts of themselves. We can't always be whole beings, I think. You know what I mean? But maybe we can. My feeling is you can. My thought says that you can't always be, because of situations that I've experienced in my life as well.
Hey, what is up, guys? Thank you so much for finishing the first half of the podcast. I hope you got some value out of it. You got some nice juice. More value coming in the second half of the podcast. Before we continue, I just want to share a little bit of a message, and that is, if you would like to be more involved with the Divicati community, there is an option to join our free Mighty Network group. Link in the description. Mighty Network is sort of like a Patreon mixed with a Facebook group. There we would post exclusive podcast content, as well as host monthly events such as like meditation or meetups, networking, etc. once we hit 100 members or more. So if this resonates, go check it out. Sign up. It's free. You can start mingling with soul aligned, purpose aligned, divine beings, and start creating those genuine collaboration and relationship, because we truly believe that only through collective ascension and collaboration we can create that beautiful 5D love-based world that we all want to live in. So yeah, check it out. And without being said, let's go back to the conversation.
Yeah, so if I go back to the potential thing, like you want to fulfill your potential in whatever that is. So if you're in a job, like, I don't want anyone to go ahead and quit their job or anything, but if you're in a job that you're feeling trapped, you're feeling like you can't express sides of yourself, the sides that you want to show in that environment aren't received well, it might be time to start looking at something else. is what I would say. Idealistically, you want to match up what your passions and what your drives and what your energy is in life to a career that serves that. Yeah, so if you're in those, and there's also other ways that, like, so one of my friends, he works in like financial advisory,
Right.
and all his other mates do as well. Yeah, and he said he's just so sick of hanging out with his mates because all they do is talk about work, or they talk about clients that were difficult to handle. And I told him, well, you can be a different light there. You could talk about clients that were easy to handle, and times that you felt really grateful and appreciative of things. And that's just how you can kind of change a bit of the culture of places, or change a bit of the direction of conversation and flow. So someone goes, I've dealt with this client the other day and they were such a pain in the ass, and they've been ball breaking me and calling me 8 o'clock each night. And then you go, you know what? I dealt with this other, they finish their story and you go, that sounds really difficult. Man, I dealt with this client the other day who was just amazing, actually. And you just talk up the better things about the role that you're doing, and sit in a place of gratefulness as well. And that gratefulness, or that appreciation is, so I'm reading this book, The Happiest Man on Earth, and it says happiness is the only thing that multiplies when you share it. Yeah. So it's similar to those things. It's the same with gratitude. It's same with like appreciation. They generally multiply when you share it.
Yeah, man, there's so many juice that I I want to grab it before I lose them. But obviously, when we reflect back on this conversation, I'll get that as well. What you were saying, taking that mask off, man. Like I understand that when you're saying people can be addicted to that mask, addicted to that ego, to this persona, and that's why sometimes when we think about, oh, who do you want to be, that's also sort of like a trap because you're kind of painting, oh, this is who I want to, and then you kind of like invest so much into that identity, that ego, like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, or I'm a father or a mother, or I'm an investor. Nah, those are just titles. That's not who you really are, right? That's just our
Exactly.
ego. And so like sometimes taking that mask off and don't not putting that facade all the time is very important, right? And I really like what you said there, where um what were you saying there just now in terms of remind me where you sit there. The last point.
Sometimes when you're in flow of things, it's really hard to go back and remember what
Yeah,
you
yeah,
said.
yeah. There was just one point where I was just trying to, but it'll come back, man. It'll come back. But yeah,
Like the happiness and gratitude being the thing that gets multiplied. Was that
yeah,
it? Or
that gets multiplied. But were you saying there when you're not in? Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, see, always comes back. That's my model, right? Is that when you're not received well, right? Instead of like shutting your own light down and trying to conform to the group, right? As your friend could like, oh yeah, this client, man, he's blah blah blah. He can conform and be part of that herd as well, right? But where it's really difficult is to right be true to your own essence, and when you don't feel right inside and saying, you know what, like this is how I feel, like because within the group setting, I'm usually the one that has like these contrary like opinion, what happened in let's say right now with the pandemic or whatever. Like I'm sure you had those conversations, or just sometimes when like you said, there are in a certain vibe, and you just want to pivot that vibe and say, hey, this is what I think. And so those are the circumstances where I feel like it's very hard to be authentic, because you are in the subject of other people's judgment, and especially from people that you care about and as well. So that's
mm,
where that's a little bit more difficult to become authentic when there's external pressures.
yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's probably, if not the biggest block towards being authentic, is the external pressures and the external way that you're viewed. Um, but I also think so example, you can be like, yeah, I always notice that you're talking this about your clients. Or you can be like, you know what I've noticed recently, guys? That I go home and I have this negative dialogue around the work that I do. And I
Mm,
feel like resentful towards my clients. You just put it out there. And
right,
once you do that, you give other people the permission to do it as well.
right.
You know what I mean? And go, you know what? I've actually noticed that about myself as well. I can't believe you said that. And other people go, well, I was actually thinking that the other day. You're just giving permission for people. You're giving the
Right.
permission and safety for people. And that's how you can kind of, yeah, pivot or change those
The space
conversations.
creator, man. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And like we all have that potential. We all have that ability to do that. It's just about having the right dialogues for it as well. Yeah. It's so easy to go, man, you're always talking shit about your clients.
Right,
The
right,
hard thing to do is go, you know what? I've noticed there's times where I talk shit about my clients and it kind of ruins my day a bit. Yeah.
right.
And just go into the emotions of it and watch people turn. Watch people go, you know what? Like, I'm so, they'll even go, I can't believe you said that.
Because
And
right
watch them,
now, the energy is not directed towards them. It's not pointing finger. It's more like, hey guys, this is how I feel, and you're coming from a sharing frame, and you're
yeah,
being vulnerable, right? And you're not really
yeah,
caring about how other people think about you, but you like, especially men, they don't like talking about their feelings or whatever. So if you can be the one that brings it up first and create that, then in that environment, people are more willing, not necessarily, but what you're saying, they're more willing to open up a little bit more.
and doing this, men's work that I've done, what I've noticed is the main thing is that men, then not that they're not willing to, they just
Okay.
haven't had the space. They
Mm,
haven't had the space or permission to do it. And that's the big key and the big lessons that I've learned. So like, with whoever's listening to this, and it's sounding like you're already doing it in your communities, is creating permission and space for people to step in, and not just men, but women as well. Women are just as cut off as men.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? They have just as, if not more difficulties than what we have in terms of societal expectation and pressures and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you can really kind of be that. I guess the catalyst in whatever group you're in.
Yeah, and if I have to boil that thing to one thing, in addition to like being vulnerable and sharing, the second thing is what you alluded to earlier, and it's just to listen, and not to have like in coaching. What we talk about is to silence the mentor inside, like the urge to always give advice, right? That's like, oh, this is what you should do. Oh, this is what you should do. Blah, 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 blah. Nah, bro. Like no one's like, sometimes people just want to be listened to. And when you are curious and when you can tap into, oh, tell me more about this, or like, oh, what else? Oh, how do you feel? Oh, what happened that time? Oh, what can you do? These simple questions, everyone can be like a good coach. And I feel like that's just having the ability to listen and not have to chime in and give your own opinion is a skill that like a lot of friends would appreciate, because you create that space, and not just listening, but also in a non-judgmental and also compassionate way, being that compassionate observer that you are and witness that you just mentioned earlier as well.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the time, like I've experienced in my life where people are like that. Oh, you got to do this.
Yeah.
Change it. Go, hey, even just doing that, just physically in your mind, going, what can I do that offers this as opposed to goes like that.
Right. Hey, take it if you want it.
Take it. And the other thing is like a good way to get you, because some people might not be at the stage where they're able to kind of just listen, and they need to talk. And I think also like having a free flowing conversation is super important. Yeah. You need to get the juices flowing on both sides, because that expands it. So if you're feeling the need to say something, and you're not at the stage where you can just shut up, how you can chime in is go, I'm feeling this need to tell you that you've got to do this. And probably what's happening is it's probably something that you have to do personally. Do you know what I mean? So that's if you voice it, you go, oh, actually, I'm probably thinking that because that's something that I need to do. I'm feeling like you need to create more healthier boundaries between work. And you go, I need to create more healthier boundaries between work. You know what I mean? I'm feeling the need to tell you that you need to create more healthier boundaries between work. That's even a layer back.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So if you can't just be a compassionate witness at times, which is really hard to do, don't be afraid to stick your 2 cents in like that. This is the urge of what's going on for me when I'm hearing you talk.
Right. As an offer, not like a direct command, right? That's a big, totally different energies right there.
Yeah. And as a sharing, my mind's doing this when your mind does that.
Right.
And then eventually you probably get to the point where you go, oh, my mind's doing that because it's something that I've got to do for myself. You know what I mean?
Now I have an urge to ask you another question.
Go for it. I just want to say that like I have this theory that everyone talks in projections.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
So it's that theory of like, hey, is anyone thirsty? Does anyone want any water?
Because they're thirsty.
Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. Yeah. Right. So what was the question that you wanted to ask?
Yeah, my question was, because you said that the biggest blockage for people is, probably is how, the external awareness and how people perceive them, right? And one of my like more like popular videos on YouTube is like how to stop caring about how other people think about you. And
so it just cut out. It just cut out for a second. You said, you were talking about the external pressures, and then it cut out.
Yeah, the external pressure, and one of the biggest thing that we talked about just now, that why people kind of shut their own light and their own authenticity is because how other people perceive you, right? For example, if I'm watching, like if I'm recording, I'm not perfect. Like, oh, how do people think about this podcast? And that kind of like goes into my mind, and that's just an example of how like I would kind of
freeze or like get stuck, or just now when I forgot to think about what I want to revert back to, and I just kind of like got a little bit sweaty because I care about how people would think about this podcast, giving like a real life example, right? And so, in my videos I talk about a little bit about how to not care, and that is to just be more aware of like how you think about yourself, and stop giving like stop seeking validation from like external circumstances, but start seeking internal validation and self-validate yourself. So that was kind of like my approach of how to care less about how other people think in a nutshell. So I'm wondering, what's your approach, or what's your perspective, what has worked with the people that you work with, to unlock this.
Yeah, so definitely. Well, once you create these ideas of who you want to be, and when I say who you want to be, like what you said before, they're character traits. I want to be caring. I want to be compassionate. I think also the beautiful thing about doing a podcast and authenticity is you can fuck up and still come back to it because it's authentic in the flow of things.
Right.
Yeah. So about creating that inner solidarity is like you have an idea of who you want to be. So, and like I said, they're character traits. So when things come along and shake that, or you're not received the way that you want to be in that, you can always have that safety net of like, well, this is who I'm trying to be in there, and I'm not always going to be that. Has that answered your question? I think I'm hearing my AUX is stuffing up, so I only heard you in one ear before. So maybe you just ask that question to me again.
Okay, so
and I'll give you the most clearest answer I can give you.
Yeah. So the basic question is like, how do we like not be blocked by how other people think about us? Like, how can we care less about how other people think? I'm just being our own light.
Yep. Yeah, I think that goes back to finding those traits. I also think it's inherent in humans to care what other people think, to care what other people feel. So yeah, people say like, it's interesting because the whole idea is like, maybe not so much don't care. It's finding a way to care that doesn't impact you so negatively, doesn't throw you underneath the bus.
Right.
Every time to me, because you're like, I've done something and it's not received well, so I'm the bad one. Yeah, so I guess it's just about standing. It's the journey, man. The journey of like finding your light, finding those the essence of who you are, finding your purpose and stuff like that. And those things take time. And once you do have like an idea or an awareness of that, continue to strive for that. And that kind of will like, that idea of who you want to be becomes so strong and so in line with your life purpose here, or what your perceived life purpose is here, that it almost doesn't matter if people receive you in a negative way, because you still have your inner foundations that you built. And to build things, it takes time. So yeah, to have your foundation of who you want to be, and know if you've, because sometimes when people say things and you're not received well, they have a point as well. You know what I mean? So don't be afraid to take that on board and go, you know what? Where in my foundation did I lack, and why did they take that like this? Here, I wasn't as compassionate as I wanted to be, actually. I said it like this as opposed to like that. So naturally they're going to have that reaction. Yeah, but generally if you continue to build those foundations and you stay aligned to who you want to be, and express it in authentic and caring and compassionate ways. I don't want to speak it all the time, but generally it's received. Hey, like, but I also think it's it's inherent in us to care what other people think and care what other people feel. That's why I believe the purpose of nearly everyone here is to help people in different ways. We all have gifts that we can offer, or ways that we can facilitate other people to find their gifts. And I think it's never more highlighted than in that situation where everyone cares so much what other people think.
Right. And man, you beautifully put it in the sense where it's about like, as a person, building up that foundation, building up that, I guess, substance, right? So that you can be internally grounded, So that's what I usually say, internal groundedness. But I like the foundation that you put, where it's your character, your purpose, your values, um, experience, etc., so that you can always, you know, your, I guess, confidence or validation is not, externally, but it's internally. But you're still aware of how other people, you know, think about you, and you can be aware and not be, you're not phased by it as much, but you can take it as good sources of feedback and then trying to upgrade from that with that growth mindset. So that's what I got out of
Yeah,
what you said there.
definitely. I think you articulated it in a much better way than what I did.
No.
But if you go back to the ego thing, yeah, if someone's given you some sort of feedback that isn't what you want to hear, or isn't in line with where you are, it could be that they're acting from out here and their essence is here. It could be that somewhere in between your projection of ego, because anything that hurts us damages our ego or damages our heart, there's some kind of disconnect in there. So there's two ways to look at it. Do you know what I mean? Either they're saying something that's not within line with truth from their authentic version of self, or there's something that I've done in there that there's a bit of a disconnect. And they're good ways to think about it as well. They're really not, really good tools to be able to pull back some layers, getting to that observer state.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to kind of move on to another topic where it's also obviously related, but you talked a little bit about the archetypes, and that's one of the good ways to understand kind of ourselves better, and like, the character traits that we want to embody. So can you tell us a little bit about the different character archetypes there are out there? And then perhaps like, then we can like, oh, okay, that sounds like me. And then it just kind of gives us a little bit more self-awareness with this framework.
Definitely. And I guess, like, to be authentic, I don't want to sound like I'm an expert in this at all. I think that there's many people's work that you guys can have a look at, or listeners can have a look at, in terms of Carl Jung's work. I also found out this morning that tarot cards are based around archetypes and the hero's journey and stuff like that. But I think maybe a really good question to ask is, and I've asked this quite a lot, it's actually a really good question to parties and stuff like that, that in any community or in any, maybe in a family or something like that, everyone will pick up a different role. And sometimes people clash because they're trying to pick up the same role. So what I like to ask, and this is something that you can just ask in general, is if this is a tribe, if everyone around you in this, so you're at a business meeting or something like that, and you're with one of your friends, close friends from the business, and you go, if this business was a tribe, who would you be in the tribe? And so that, like I said, I'm not an expert on understanding all the different archetypes. But I think that's a really kind of good question to help start uncovering some layers around, like, oh yeah, who would I be in the tribe? Maybe I'd be the musician who is a servant of music, who vibrationally creates spaces. Maybe I'm the healer. The healer is someone who will listen or has tools that they can provide so people can heal themselves, who's compassionate. Do you know what I mean? Maybe I'm the captain who helps navigate. So you look at all these fantasy characters even. Do you know what I mean? You go, well, I'm the fairy. Do you know what I mean? Or I'm the chief. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's just a really, so like I said, I don't want to sound like an expert in it, but it's a really good start into uncovering who you see yourself as personally. And then the next step is, who do you think I am in this? If this is a tribe, who do you think I would be in it?
So,
and then you can get an idea of.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, keep going.
I was going to say, then you can get an idea of how other people view you as well.
Yeah, my question was like, is there a framework that you? Because you said you're the chief archetype. Did you just kind of like, come up with that, like something pop into your mind, or was it based on like a framework that you read?
For me, it was like, so the chief archetype is based around like the king archetype, but I find chief more because it just what resonates with me. Like, I feel like I look ancient. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I look ancient. So one, but also like I had this experience there's been many experiences in my life where like, just naturally you'll fall into a position of being a leader or a follower, and there's no higher or lower hierarchy in there. Do you know what I mean? Because even followers have a role to play in leading. And a good leader takes on board what the followers are saying. And I felt like that's always been something that I've been good at. Like, maybe the story I tell, and it's something that so I'll just tell the story. You tell me what you think of him. So when I was overseas, the first time I went, I was there with my little stepsister and my dad and my stepmom, and we went to get a coffee. And then after the coffee, I'm like, well, let's go back to the hotel where we're staying. And my dad's like, yeah, cool, the hotel's this way. And I'm like, no, it's that way. And he goes, no, the hotel's this way. And I went, cool, man, you go that way, I'll go this way, and I'll see you back at the hotel. Having knowledge in that I knew where the hotel was. And my stepsister's like, you know what? I'm going to go with Narada. And then as we're walking, she asked me something. She goes, hey, why are you always right? And that's a big thing to tell me, because I can get quite righteous, because I feel like when I know, do you know what I mean? So the idea of being right is you can remain humble, a humble recipient in the knowledge, as opposed to like, this is what the knowledge is. So I kind of said to her, I said that I don't think that I'm always right. I just take on board what's being offered, and then somehow I can find the fairest place within that kind of suits everyone. So it's an interesting story to relate to about direction, but even like in terms of like, if you're, when I was younger, my house would be the house that everyone would come back and kick back at. You know what I mean? And in that, I was able to go, cool, this person needs that, this person needs this, or this person said that they need that, this person's showing that they need this. How can I match this situation that everyone gets their needs met? So that just resonates with me as being, like I said, feeling older, like ancient, and feeling, being South American, the chief resonates with me, but it's based around the king archetype.
Right.
And I would encourage like any viewers or listeners, and even yourself, to go through some of the Jungian archetypes.
The Carl Jung archetype?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Okay.
Yep.
And man, you tap into one thing that just gave me chills, in terms of like, when you know certain knowledge, just be humble and like appreciate, like I didn't know, like you put it in a better way, but like just being humble in that knowledge, and not saying, oh, like, oh, I know this, I'm so smart or whatever, but like say, hey, this is this is what I know, and this is what I can share, right? This is awesome.
Yeah, and that puts it levels any playing field with anyone that you're with. So even with me, with some of the clients I'm with, I don't act like I know things. I mean, I'm just curious to know what they know. Not all the time, like I said, depending where I am on the spectrum, but like in my higher self and where I want to be is someone that is curious to know what others know. And then when they share their experience, I will share mine. That's interesting. My experience is this of that. And they go, you know what? That actually sounds a bit like what I was thinking as well. Or like, they might say something just in different language that resonates exactly with what I say. So yeah, I think the idea of like being someone who holds knowledge is to holds knowledge. What do we know anyway? Right. Do you know what I mean? If we really just strip back the layers, what do we know? But someone that has, an idea of, I guess, who they want to be in this world, is to create space for others, to share their knowledge and their ideas of who they want to be or who they have been.
And man, that beautifully kind of flows into kind of like the last part I want to talk to you about before we kind of move on to the golden question segment, where I want to ask you some curated questions I thought about. But like because also in your own life right now, there's an example of you being authentic, and with what happening in the world, there's so many different perspectives on how people are dealing with this pandemic or the government policies, and you have been someone that has been kind of vocal about speaking up to these kind of things and the injustice, or the I guess the contrary of what like freedom is all about, right, in a sense.
You talked about, you know, the importance of standing up to your own truth, especially in these times where people, like, you know, perhaps there are certain tactics that use the herd mentality to shut people's light down, and use, you know, they are able to use people's caring about how other people think about them to not express ourselves, right? So can you talk little bit about like being a true version of ourselves in these kind of times, you know, because we are in a truly like very unique kind of times at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's look, it's a really touchy subject, and part of me feels a little uncomfortable talking about it now.
Okay.
What I would probably like want to highlight is the importance of standing in your authenticity. And I think it strikes a chord with people where they don't understand that your authenticity comes from your experiences, comes from what you've seen in life. So like I will speak for me in my life. Yeah. I grew up in poverty. So I never had shit. So naturally people that had stuff, I'm going to be envious of. Yeah. I grew up with an insecure attachment system. Growing up like that makes me less trustworthy, especially with people that say, trust me. I look at things like history, where in the framework of history, I can't remember the last time the government ever done anything for me as the person that I am in my situation. Keep in mind, I grew up in poverty, insecure attachment system, so these things flow into each other.
Mm-hmm.
So naturally, I don't trust the government, and I grew up in poverty, so my experience is they don't do anything for someone like me. So just little things like that, which form a basis or an idea of where I'm at. That's different from someone who's maybe grew up with inherent money, who grew up with parents that were both home all the time and loved them and cared for them. They will have other issues to what I have. But it may not manifest in a distrust for the government. It may not manifest in a distrust for the narrative. Do you know what I mean? So maybe I just want to like probably talk on that basis and not so much getting to the nitty gritty of
Mm-hmm.
my beliefs around it. But I think it's just important to own your authenticity to it. So naturally for me, like I said, I can be quite righteous and stuff as well. So there's a lot of things that for me can be that people can challenge, which I'm open to the challenging of it. I think the danger comes when there's a complete shut off or an extermination or a censorship of any different views. When people, how does that sit with you when there's a shut off or a censorship? Because I think that like no one knows. If I go back to that, and for me, school isn't a place where you go to learn something; it's a place of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So my ideas of things are just a little bit different to the way that the world operates. Because I don't know, inherently, I feel that there's something wrong with this place.
Right.
Like it could be so beautiful.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I don't know if others feel that, but for me, I definitely feel that strongly. Like, why is it like this?
Right.
Why does one person have billions of dollars and others can't get water, can't get food? It doesn't feel right for me. Do you know what I mean? So that's the thing. If you're tapped into your feelings, don't be afraid to share them. Do you know what I mean? A lot of people that aren't tapped into the feelings share. And that becomes really difficult because then people that are tapped in go, whew, I better not share that. But if you are tapped in, don't be afraid to share that. Do you know what I mean? Don't be afraid to see the authenticity of it. But I think like on a world scale, it gets really dangerous when there's a shutting off of ideas or there's a sticking to this one narrative or else. Do you know what I mean? Right. And I don't know, like also like having listened to and grew up like on conspiracy theories, they feel like they're all coming to a head during this point in time. Right. All the conspiracy theories that people were talking about that seemed whack back in the day, that you go, no, that would never happen. Like in Melbourne, they were fining people for hanging out with their families and friends during the lockdowns. You could get fined for seeing your family and friends. Like if I'd said that to anyone a year ago or 2 years ago, they would have been like, I'll never let them do that. I ask anyone, I'm sure that they would all say, I'll never let them do that. I know I would have said that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? But then all of a sudden, I'm cooped up at home, haven't seen family and friends for weeks,
Mm-hmm.
or at the risk of being fined. So
Right.
yeah, I think that there's just a lot of dangerous things that are occurring in the world in terms of censorship, in terms of like um, social justice warriors that whatever uni students. I'm talking to box people in, but the uni students that have been in education their whole life, there's really just an indoctrination,
Mm-hmm.
and then they play off as that they're more educated, and that's why their views are worth more. But I would say that they're more indoctrinated, which is a bit more challenging. And always happy to have a conversation with anyone that wants to chat to me about this. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I guess just offering a different perspective, and not being afraid to offer that as well. I also think that on a spiritual level, I'm a bit of a mirror. I'm renowned for bringing up shit in people that they don't want to see, or that it's triggering. It's just what I've done my whole life, and I think that's just a role that I'll probably continue to play.
Right. Nah, man, like that's why I created a space for like us to tap into like conscious conversations, because I'll also have guests talking about like investments and talking about like the financial system, and those are things that we're not taught, we're not being aware of. And especially like we need to, be educated ourselves and have this proactive to dig into the rabbit hole and not just kind of take everything in face value what the media tells us. And yeah, so I totally agree. Especially, it's very important to have that free discussion where ideas can form, because it's through those ideas, through the Socratic kind of discussions, that we can kind of distill to the truth, right? Like, who's it to say that when someone with authority kind of says one thing, it doesn't mean it's 100% true, right? In fact, like small minorities of companies own like the majority of the media companies. I don't know, like 90% or something like that, at least in America. And so like if we kind of like peel back and ask more questions, and who's writing these scripts, the anchor is just kind of reading what's behind what they're told to be said, right? And who gets to write those scripts, and what's the intention or the behind those scripts. And so those are things that I ask, and I feel like when people ask these questions, then we start to like question. And then that's why I feel like what you said there today in this episode on an individual level, because sometimes when we look at what's going on, I'm like, okay, what the fuck can we do? Like we're just kind of one small potato in this big massive world that seems so fucked up right now. But what you're saying, in those house meetings, in those business meetings, in your own friendship group, that's when we have the framework, like what we said today. Tap into your own feelings, offer, be that compassionate witness. Those are the things that when we start to do today, it will make a difference, at least within our friend circle, and that could have a ripple effect, right? Obviously, that's coming from a very optimistic kind of mind frame, but that's what we got to have, right? We still got to feel empowered, because we don't want to feel disempowered when we hear about all these fucked up things, that we have to be the change that we want to see in the world, right? Like what Michael Jackson always says, his song. So that's what I got out of this conversation today, is like how to understand what's going on. We need more truth. We need more light workers. We need to spread that light a little bit more. But also in our individual life, this is the framework that we can approach life with in a more authentic way and true way.
Definitely, yeah. I think that like the only worlds that we can change are our own, and whatever comes into our orbits. And that's you said about being empowered. That's where we have the power. And I think to revert it back to what we said before, um, operate from a place of relationship and not from a place of risk.
Mm.
I mean, or it's too risky for me to say that here. What's this relationship like? Is it strong enough for me to say that here?
Mm.
Operate from that, or do I want it to be? You know what I mean? And when the more that you can create these relationships between, because everyone's their own world in this galaxy of human beings. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah. So do your own work on your own world, and then don't be afraid to share that.
Yeah. So moving on to the last question I have for you, as last two more questions. The first one is, it doesn't have to be related to the topic that we talked today, just in general, right? Like, what is the deepest truth that you have learned that you wish you learned earlier in your life?
Hmm. I'm sure I'm going to look back on this question after the podcast and be like, oh, I wish I'd said this as well. But the deepest truth that I've learned is, it's one of the deepest truths I've learned, is that I don't know anything, and my truth is my truth. The deepest truth is probably just my truth that I've learned, and knowing that my truth is just an expression of my journey. It's not necessarily someone else's truth. So yeah, and in that, remain humble, because you don't know it all. You don't know what someone else's truth is, or the truth. I think there's this big thing about people being truth seekers or whatever. You seek the truth in yourself. Seek to understand yourself. Yeah. So, and I think and another big thing I think I wish I learned earlier is something's coming to me about my parents. I mean, wishing that I understood before my mum passed. I wish I understood that she was just a human going through her journeys and her traumas and reenacting them and playing them out. I wish I was able to see. With me, I'm so grateful I have an amazing relationship with my dad, but I wish I was able to see him as, once again, just another human flowing through the world, another person going through the world, figuring themselves out, much younger than what I did. I think they're really kind of key, important things.
Nice, man. That was beautiful, man. That was beautiful. How are you feeling right now?
Great.
Nice.
How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling present. I'm feeling like I don't have to worry too much about the flow of things, or like, oh, like there's this gap. I just want to kind of be more in the experience of kind of enjoying the process of actually have a good conversation rather than thinking too much of the format in my head. That's what I've kind of always reflected back on when I'm editing. But when I'm actually filming the podcast, it's relatively harder for me to just kind of like just focus like this is just a normal conversation. So I think like that's what I was able to unlock a little bit more today with you on this show, where I'm just more focused on it than all the other stuff, all the structure stuff.
Yeah, well, a big lesson that I learned recently as well is like, so when I run these like men's groups with the boys, a lot of the facilitators and the lead facilitators all run it a bit differently. And there's this desire in me to grab onto the certainty and be like, oh, I need it to be like this, or I need to be like that, so that I can conceptually understand how it is. So I need to have, a framework or a structure, all those kind of things. And what I feel like what that is us trying to grab onto the certainty in an uncertain world, where if you jump into the uncertainty and flow with it, that's flow state. Yeah. And I think that's the beautiful thing, and why I was really happy to come on this today is because it's a podcast on authenticity. So it doesn't matter if I stuff up, or it doesn't matter if I do anything or say things that aren't particularly right, or things I'm going to look back on in an hour's time, be like, I wish I had said that, because it's authentic in the moment. Right. And that's why it felt really good to do this today.
Yeah. Nice. Awesome.
I have this theory that we're all falling. It's a bit of a gloomy theory, but this theory that we're all falling down this bottomless pit. We don't know where the end is, and one day it just comes out of nowhere. Bang! We hit it, and we're gone. Yeah. And throughout life, people probably begin to realize this, and then look for things to grab onto. Oh, this is my job. Oh, this is my work title. Or this is my financial situation. This is my wife, and this is my kids. And they look for things to grab onto to provide some sense of security in the drop. Where the people that have the most fun are the ones that realize that they're just floating on air and start doing backflips. You know what I mean? They're not worried about the drop. They go, I'm flying here.
Right. Yeah. Man, we talk a lot about being in the flow, being surrender. Like there's this book called The Surrender Experiment by Michael A. Singer, and I've kind of
talked a lot about that. And I'm trying to incorporate that, being more free flow and just kind of surrendering to the omens, right? The signs, as The Alchemist as well. Such a great book, such a great, easy read as well. So it's about internalizing those concepts more and more. And also in like that's so universal, where it's not about like some big things. It's also just about this one conversation. I can be more in a surrendered state in this right now, this moment, not having to be perfect, right? As you know, when you freestyle, like you always freestyle, so you understand when you freestyle, there's like, for me at least, right? There's one that's like I'm trying to like rhyme on every single punchline. There's another one where I'm just like not really thinking in a meditative state, where I'm just letting it flow, right? That's the real true freestyle that we can tap into. So I'm trying to be more in that true freestyle state right now in this conversation.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And beautiful. And I think that what you reference there is there's points. I can be rhyming all the time, or I can just be in that flow meditative state where it's about what I'm saying over what I'm rhyming.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to like, you know, having these ideas of what you want to be. I want to be compassionate. I want to be inquisitive. You know what I mean? So you have an idea of what you want to be, but don't be afraid to jump in the flow state to get to that idea. You know, you might have little dot points around what you want to speak about,
right?
But don't be afraid to go off that. You know what I mean? They're just reference points that you can come back to. It's like setting an intention. I want to be this, you know, I want to be that, or this is what I want to be able to provide in this thing. Then you have a reference point to go back to, but it doesn't mean that you can't flow off that. And that's what I would say is flow state.
Nice. And so
not that you're just floating, you know what I mean? You're not just floundering in the water.
Yeah. Well, we had a lot of insights today, man. We talk a lot about different stuff, from being the essence to the archetype, and offering instead of like, you know, commanding, and how to understand our foundation a little bit better so that we can kind of be more internally grounded. So to help the listeners kind of have that one big takeaway, and that one kind of big thing that they can apply, can you just kind of distill the juices down into like, what's that one thing that you wish them to kind of like start applying and taking action right after this podcast?
I think, well, one of the things that you said is understand that things are happening for you and not to you, and let the inquiry always start within. Don't inquire as to why is that situation like this, or why is that like this, or why did that person do that? Let the inquiry start within. Why did I take this? Why did I take what that person said like this? I think that they're two kind of key elements that you could use.
Right. And that's the self-check-in method that we actually didn't have a chance to get into. So you think that's the key action step that we all should do, is to self-check-in?
There's two elements. Like I said, that's the internal journey. Right. The outside journey is the checking within your team, within your friendship group, or whatever. I'm happy to go through that briefly if you want.
Yeah.
I think I touched based on it. Yeah. So like at the Lighthouse Foundation, we did this thing called I Feel Like Saying, which is just checking into the space. And most people would say like, oh, I feel like saying that I'm happy that the sun's out today. That's one version of doing it. The other way of doing it is saying, I feel like saying that I'm feeling it really hard to be present today because I have a few other things that I want to kind of tick off and do. And I had a pretty big weekend. So I'm just kind of like struggling to be a bit present today. That's a different feeling towards, oh, I'm happy that the sun's out. So it's about expressing something that's vulnerable, but not personal in that I feel like saying. In the check-in is a bit more of a different method, where it's a pretty similar thing about settling into the space, but it can step into something a bit more personal. So how I could check in is I could be like, and how you set it up with your friends is it's really, you know, it's when you check in, no one else speaks. Everyone just receives. So it's like, could be the first time that people have ever spoken and just been received, and not being like, oh, you know, what did it feel like to be like that? It's just going, this is how I feel. And it's the same in both circumstances. People just thank you after you shared. So it might be like, I'll check in now. I'll do two of them. Narada checking in. Yeah, feeling awesome. Yeah, feeling great. You know, cool podcast. That was really dope. Thanks for the opportunity.
Right.
One check-in, or another check-in to go, Narada checking in. I'm feeling in a place of real gratitude at the moment, where I have abilities to step into spaces like this and share some of my experiences and hope that they resonate with others. I want to live a life of purpose. I want to live a life of legacy. And this just feels like another little like kick onto my track or onto my path when I'm able to do something like this with people that I care about and people that I met 3 years ago, and we still keep in contact even though we're on the other side of the world. Sitting in a real place of gratitude at the moment. And looking forward to hearing this back.
Right.
Narada checked in. And so just having those two different experiences, and then you don't say anything to that. You just go, thank you for sharing. And maybe I'll allow you an opportunity to do that as well. If you want to check in, the opportunity is there.
Got you. I'm good with the check-in right now, man. I don't feel like checking in right now, but I feel like
that's authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's authentic in going, no, I don't want to at the moment as well. Yeah. And like I said, there's value in just the listening. So even if you're in those spaces and you don't want to check in, even just listening creates space for others to check in.
Man, so those are the big two takeaways, is to saying, I feel like saying, and that would just be something less personal, and then just creating like check-in, say, hey, this is how I feel. And that could also be a check-in with yourself, right? Not necessarily you have to speak that to other people. You can just say that, like, when you're taking the elevator and looking in the mirror in the morning in the shower, whatever, right? That's more like a tool that you use to be in tune with the essence inside, so that you can, once you know how you feel inside, then you can start kind of sharing like the authentic feeling, right? Because you did the check-in, so you're tuned internally.
Yep.
Right.
And even if you don't know, don't be afraid to share, because it gives others permission when they don't know. And a lot of us don't. Do you know what I mean? A lot of us don't. I know at times when I don't check in with myself and I'm sitting in a state of unknown. I think a key element is, like I said, there's the internal journey, the external journey. A key element and the key gift of this life that we've been given is the ability to share. So don't be afraid to share, whatever it is. I don't know at the moment. I'm feeling freaked out. You know what I mean? Actually, the check-in makes me feel awkward when I do it. You know what I mean? Whatever it is, like, don't be afraid to share that as well. That gives permission for others to do the same. And then we can all figure it out together. I say figure it out with quotation marks.
Nice. All right, man. Is there anything that you feel like sharing before we kind of wrap this up officially? Like, is there anything you want to point people to, or check out, anything like that?
Look, I think that like, I just want to highlight that everyone's journey is their own journey. I think if you take away a few things from this podcast, it's things are happening for you, not to you. Do the inquiring within. Let the inquiring start within. Don't be afraid to check in and share with others. Ask really, really good questions and speak in metaphors, and that will help you connect to others in a really powerful way. And just to you, man, really thankful and grateful for this opportunity to come on here and share, really.
Man, thank you.
And I really feel really proud of like the work that you're doing, do you know what I mean? And also humbled by the impact that you said I've had on your life when we met overseas. So
yeah, man. Man, thank you so much as well, because I feel like being that authentic version is definitely a little bit scary, because that's like taking the leap of faith, following the omens, following the signs. And that's not easy, because sometimes it's easier to be in that cocoon. But sometimes that's the hero's journey that we talked a little bit about. And I feel like I'm on that. But obviously there's still a lot of these like micro moments, like we talked about, how to be more of your true expression at all times, and knowing that, hey, this is the best that I could do, and then just be in that free flowing state where I'm not clinging to the certainty, but more of just enjoying the flow of life. And so, man, there's so many little things, and I really appreciate these conversations and the path that I'm on at the moment as well, because I'm starting to feel as I do more of these podcasts and more regularly, that when I reflect on them, I truly can shift like not a lot of different things, but maybe one or two things. But that just makes me a better person. I can do that every single week. And this is part of what I do right now as an experimentation for the next, next 16 episodes. And I'll see how I'll reevaluate then. But man, so thank you so much for hopping on this call. And we had a beautiful kind of reconnect a couple weeks back where I just really felt like a big chill and like you're someone that's super inspiring and awakened. And so, yeah, just to dive deep on this one central topic with you was a great pleasure, man.
Ditto to that, man.
Yeah. All right. So, hey, catch you next time on the Conscious Conversation. We will have Sunny Lee on the show where we'll talk about self-investing and how to allocate that your resource to become a better version of yourself. So yeah, stay tuned for next time. And if you like this show, please give it a like, subscribe. And if you're listening to this on the Apple podcast, make sure you leave a nice little review because that helps bump up that algorithm, baby. And last thing is, feel free to also join our free Mighty Network group where Narada and I would actually, where Narada would guide me on a, what is it? Mind, a body, and abdomen.
It's an MBIT training, so it's multiple brain integration techniques.
Multiple. See, I'll learn more about that. But if you want to check out that bonus content, make sure you join the free Mighty Network group where we will host regular events, meetups when we have 100 or more members in there. It's a free group right now, but there you can also kind of mingle and network with like-minded, soul-aligned individuals. So yeah, if that resonates, check it out. But yeah, we'll end it right here. Thank you so much for listening.